portion of the day. Now, as with any subject, I think it's important that we found everything we do in a culture, because in this school, it's not just about being technically proficient. It's not just about putting words on pages or numbers on pages. I want us to have a cultural literacy, because when you're culturally literate, meaning you know where things come from, you can use those skills in a much more powerful way. It takes you to a place beyond job training, but it gets you to a place of creativity, true creativity. So this is about cultural literacy. So what do I mean? So how is cultural literacy relevant to writing? So if we want to talk about writing, we have to start where most of the African ancient arts began, and that's Kemet. So in Kemet, we find the origin of chemistry, we find the origin of agriculture, we find the origin of architecture. And in the same way, we find the origin of writing in Kemet. In Kemet, they had figures called netchers. Netchers is a word in the Medu Netcher. Medu Netcher is just the language of the Kemites. And Medu Netcher is spelled MDWNTR, or translated as divine speech. So when the Greeks saw the Medu Netcher, they called them hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs. And hieroglyphs means sacred carvings. See, that's a very simplified version of what the Kemites call divine speech. Now, why am I talking about netchers and divine speech? Because each netcher was represented by a netcheru. And the netcheru is what we'll call today a god or a goddess. So the netcheru of writing, his name was Jehuti. Jehuti. And that's how to spell it, Jehuti. And Jehuti was the netcheru of writing. So, and this is a picture of Jehuti. They say he has the head of an ibis bird. So if you look at the carvings, the pictures in ancient Kemet, they have this picture to represent Jehuti. Okay, so whenever you see this, and how do you know it's Jehuti? Look what's in his hand. He has a tablet that he's inscribing words on. That's why he's known as the netcher of writing. You see the tablet, the rectangular tablet? So that shows Jehuti is the god of writing, or the netcher of writing. And this is from the book by a Kemetic scholar named Imfudishi Jehutimas. And notice in his name he has Jehuti. That means he's glorifying the fact that he's a writer. You know, he's a warrior, he's a spiritual healer. So
the person who wrote the book is alive, but Jehuti,
alive, yes.
he's alive, but
yes.
the netcher is
right.
not.
He's recognizing Jehuti as an ancestor.
Right.
So let's read out this short little passage from Imfudishi's book, Spiritual Warriors Are Healers, and then I'm going to read another passage from this other book called The Destruction of Black Civilization. And this is a book I recommend you all read, because it tells us about our history and it tells us what we need to do to regain our power. So what does Imfudishi say about Jehuti? He says, the netcher of good speech, intelligence, and wisdom, the scribe of the netcheru. And that's another word we want to focus on, scribe. Scribe is just an ancient word that they use for writing. Okay, so when you see scribe, think writer. So he was the scribe of the netcheru, the universal mind in balance. He is the neb of divine words, time, universal balance, and the judge of Heru and Set. Jehuti is self-produced, the heart of Ra and the tongue of Ptah. It was Jehuti who spoke the sacred words which gave Ptah the energy necessary to affect the creation of the universe. He is the netcher of arts and science, the netcher of law, both in heaven and upon earth. Now listen to this. It says, Jehuti is the neb of Medu Netcher, the great magician, the divine manifestation of writing and articulate speech, the recorder of time, teacher of mysteries, and a mentor. So not only is he the netcher of writing, he's also the netcher of divine manifestation and the netcher of science and the recorder of time. So all of this writing that we see today, or all of the writing we see in Kemet, it can be credited from Jehuti. Now, how do we bring this up? Because this is ancient wisdom. How do we bring it up to the modern day? What is the political purpose of all this? You know, we can't just say, oh, he's a good writer without connecting it to something that concretely relates to us.
What do y'all think that is?
What's that?
I was asking, what do they think the connection between
Yes.
ancient? What do they think it is?
Right. What do you think the connection is between ancient writers and writers today? Like how is what? History.
Yeah.
Okay. In history, I think it's connected historically, but it's also, so let's write that down. Historical, and I'm gonna write historical memory. So that means when you see Africans writing today, it's coming out of a historical memory of what we used to be in ancient Kemet. But the flip side of that is when we get attacked, when we get colonized, the memory is destroyed. So what we have now is historical amnesia. If you know what amnesia is,
Anybody know?
what is amnesia?
Oh,
Yes.
when you get hit on the head,
Yeah, what happens when you get hit on the head?
you get knocked out,
You get knocked out, and then what
you
happens?
faint, you
You
forget.
faint. And what happens
Yeah,
when
he
you
said it.
forget?
Yeah, he's
You
speaking.
forget. So you can think of what happened to Africans is we got knocked on the head very hard by a genocidal killer. We got knocked on the head, and we went into a deep, deep unconscious state. And now we're in a state of amnesia, meaning we can't remember Jehuti. We can't remember any of the things in ancient Kemet that helped form who we are today. So as Africans today, we have a responsibility to what? To restore historical memory, or in the Akan language, they call it Sankofa. Sankofa means to go, Sankofa.
That's my friend's name.
Really?
Where is
Yeah.
he from?
Wow. He's Tanzanian.
Oh, really? So Sankofa is actually a West African word,
Mhm.
but that shows that as a unity, what they call a cultural unity between regions in Africa. So even though he lives in Tanzania, he can still use a word like Sankofa because he's African. He's not West African, he's African. So as long as you're an African person, you can pick from any region you want
Yep.
and use those concepts because we're African people. So what does Sankofa mean? It means go back and retrieve. And sometimes it's symbolically shown this way.
Yeah. I can find a picture of it.
Go for me
Now, I
to
can
go
draw it.
back.
I know how to draw it.
Oh, okay.
It means go back and retrieve. So this is called, you see it's a bird, right? And the bird is turning his head backwards. And what is this? This is an egg.
Oh.
The egg represents the future. So this is the offspring. This is your descendants. And they're saying in order for us to understand history, to understand the present, we have to go back and retrieve that which is from our past. So the deeper you look into history, the more empowered you become in the present. And the more empowered you become in the present, the more authority you have in the future. So that's just the African concept of time. Time is circular. It's not a straight line, it's circular.
So Sankofa is go back and
Go back and retrieve. Or sometimes they say go back and fetch.
I know.
Go back and
I'm
fetch.
gonna go tell them.
Yes, go tell. Go back and fetch. So how is Sankofa relevant to this book? So this is Dr. Chancellor Williams. He's no longer living. But when he wrote this book, he wrote it because he wanted to teach Africans all the mistakes they made in history to put them in the current situation. And when we read this, he talks about writing. Because one of the devastating things that happened to Africans is the art of writing was destroyed among us.
Mm-hmm.
And when the art of writing was destroyed, we no longer had the power to create civilizations in the way we used to. So I'm going to get to these now. And then, so let me read this short passage from Chancellor Williams, and I'm going to open the floor for questions. So, Dr. Williams, he says, forgetting the names of ancient centers of importance was nothing compared to the tragedy of the blacks in almost completely forgetting the very art of writing, which they themselves invented. And he says, this was one of the most tragic losses to repeat that was ever suffered by a whole people. And in view of the anti-black course of the subsequent history, the blacks needed their written language and records more than any other people. So he's saying we need writing more than any other people, more than the Chinese, the Arabs, the whites, the Indians. We need writing more than anyone. And it says just how and why this people discontinued the use of writing has been set forth rather clearly and in some detail in the foregoing pages. However, the matter is of such transcendent importance that I hope some black scholar will devote an entire book detailing this one episode in the long history of Africans. Y'all could be that scholar. Y'all could be the ones to write the book about why we lost writing and how we're going to regain it. And it says, the story would cover the period of migrations and dispersions when writing was needless, if not impossible, to the general loss of the art itself. I say general loss again because of the course of some African societies did not completely lose the art of writing, even under conditions where its use seemed utterly futile. And it says, therefore, and I'm skipping now, it says, therefore, in any society where the scribes, remember the scribe, in any society where the scribes were either captured or for whatever reason disappeared, the art of writing in that society died. So he's saying, and part of the colonial strategy of Mzungu was when they targeted African societies, it was like, where's the writer? Where he at?
Yep.
Raise your hand.
Wait there.
They would say, where's the writer? Where's the scribe? They'd say,
Where's the libraries?
Where's the libraries? Who's the scribe? And then African, I'm the scribe, cut his head off.
Wow.
Why? Because you cut the writer heads off, nobody else in that civilization can give them the knowledge they need to progress. Then they say, where's the libraries? And they say, oh, our library's over there. Set it on fire.
Yep.
Why set the libraries on fire? Because that's their wisdom. That's their knowledge. They don't, and they say in order to dominate people, we have to take their knowledge base. You see, so it's very strategic in how they went about destroying African civilizations. Target the writers and target the libraries. In fact, they said when they would light the libraries on fire, the fires were burning so intensely that it would take 6 months to put it out. Now think about that. Imagine a fire that it took you 6 months to put out. And then imagine how many books they had. That it took 6 months to
That means
burn.
they had a lot of books in there.
So all of this information we got from Kemet, this is just a fraction.
Yeah.
You know, it's really what we really should be knowing we don't know. You know, we can only access it through what? Our historical memory. But there is no record on paper because a lot of it was burned. So when people try to make it seem as though we don't know things, or your Mzungu say, oh, y'all don't know as much as us, we like, yeah, because your ancestors burned. First of all, we do know more. But second of all, we could know even more if your ancestors didn't burn our libraries. Okay?
And what was the number that they said and how many libraries they burned?
No, it's hundreds.
It was like hundreds.
It's hundreds.
Yeah.
And the oldest library, the oldest university systems, this is just a side note, was in Timbuktu and Sankore.
You heard of Timbuktu before? Anybody?
I know they mentioned it a lot. I'm tired.
So Timbuktu, that's in Mali, you know, West Africa, Mali. And Sankore, I believe that was in Ghana. So these was Mali and Ghana, they had empires. And this was before colonialism. This pre-colonial Africa. And the entire world would go to West Africa to be educated. You know, in the same way the Greeks would go to Kemet, the rest of the world would go to Timbuktu and Sankore to get their education. So we have to remember, as Africans, we are the teachers of the world. We aren't just students, we're the teachers of the world. We're students of each other, but we're teachers of everybody else.
Yep.
So
Yep.
we shouldn't look at anybody else as if they could teach us anything, because
Yep.
we already know. Our ancestors knew everything.
African children are more intelligent than any adult Mzungu.
Right.
They can't teach
And I want
anything.
And I want y'all to look up this book. It's by an ancestor of ours. He's from America. And the book was called, write this down, y'all can Google it. It's called The Natural Genius of Black Children. And the author of this book is Amos Wilson. Dr. Amos Wilson. He was an American, African, in America, a psychologist. Yes, I was a woman.
I don't have any Wi-Fi to look it up.
Yeah, you don't have to look it up now. That's